Man, what a day I've had. February Battlescroll updates for Kruleboyz. Art by Created Man. Come check out the Discord. Sign up for Patreon. You know the drill. Oh man, I've spent so many hours today working on this. Very exciting. Very exciting. Okay, so from a Kruleboyz perspective, let's look at some of these game changes. So Core Battalion Wizard Finder has had an addition to it. If you're in that battalion, you now have a 5-up spell ignore. That's good. They've also added a battle tactic, where if you are contesting an objective that was controlled by your opponent on your turn, just contested, not controlled, if that hero has a null stone adornment, you get a battle tactic. So it's actually a pretty easy battle tactic. They're trying to incentivize us to take the null stone adornment. So how does this affect Kruleboyz? Not at all. We want to be low drops. I don't think we will be taking wizard finders. And we're always going to have a Swamp Call Shaman, so we're not taking null stone adornments. So this is kind of nothing for us, really. They also changed wards, so the bodyguard, as it's colloquially known, rule, where you pass off wounds from like a hero onto like a battle line, for example. A good example of this is Egomaniac. It's now considered a ward role. So what that means in terms of the actual game is that things that shut off ward rolls now shut this off. So Nasty Hex gets a buff. There's just more things now that we can use Nasty Hex for, and Egomaniac takes a slight nerf. So I don't think there's a ton of things that shut off ward rolls, really. Like, none really come to mind. I know that they're out there and that they exist, but I think Nasty Hex gets a bigger buff than Egomaniac gets a nerf, if that makes sense. So that's cool, right? That's fine. Points changes. Very minor points changes for Kruleboyz. Nashtooth got a 10-point reduction. Monsterkilla's got a 5-point reduction to be in line with the 10-point increment. And the Killaboss with Stabgrot got a 10-point decrease as well. So Nashtooth was already cheap, and I don't think people were normally taking him. So it's like, whatever. The reason that people weren't running Nashtooths, I think, is not a points problem. I think it's more just a hero slot problem. We want Gobsprak, we want Snatchaboss, we want 3 Swamp Call Shamans, right? But, so, I think that you could maybe fit the Nashtooth in a little bit easier now. Somebody in my Discord, Grunbag, said, on one list I can swap Swamp Boss for Snatchaboss due to the Nashtooth drop, so it's fine. And that's kind of how I feel about it. It's fine. 10 points, sure, I'll take 10 points. Do I think that any of these point changes are a big impact for Kruleboyz? No. Do I think that any of these changes are big impact on Kruleboyz? The biggest change really for Kruleboyz was Nasty Hex. So it's like a slight buff, and I think that's about it. Nothing else in Kruleboyz really changed, which is really disappointing to me, to be honest, because like I was watching the interview that they do, like the community watch or whatever it's called on the Warhammer community page or whatever it is, the interview with like the GW guy, and he was saying that, oh yeah, like Kruleboyz are still at 45% win rate, but a bunch of talented players have picked up this army recently, and agree. You have Jacob Brandon, what was it, 7th at LVO, and like of all the Greenskins armies, Kruleboyz did the best at LVO, but I think I mentioned this in a previous video, maybe I didn't. I don't think it's because the army's good, I think it's because some very skilled players have picked up a high skill ceiling army and are doing very well with it. And I think by definition, if an army is very high skill ceiling and the average skilled player struggles with it, I think almost by definition that's a bad army, right? It's like, hey, this army's really, really good, but only if you're really, really good. And you're like, well, what if I'm mediocre? And you're like, well, then the army's terrible. It's like, well, like, sure, that's not a good army, right? Anyway, overall, relatively small changes for Kruleboyz. Check out the rest of the videos. I got a whole bunch coming out right now. Like, subscribe. Wow.